This is all part of Five's Lawless Britain week, and we have exclusive poll results in conjunction with 5 News, showing that more than half of the public would support bringing back capital punishment in the UK. In fact, 54% of Brits say the death penalty could be used for certain crimes, with more women than men backing the calls to bring it back. Tonight on 5, Dan Walker has a new documentary in which he travels to the US, seeing how the death penalty works there, and we can have a look at a clip of it now.
Over the years, the issue of the death penalty has often been debated in the UK. Since our last execution in 1964, America has killed more than 1,600 people. I'm trying to understand why it's so ingrained in the culture here. I'm speaking to a man who's been sentenced to death. Charles Thompson, a double murderer, has been on death row for 26 years.
Well, it looks like an amazing show, doesn't it? Dead Man Walking, Dan Walker on death row, airs on 5 tonight, 9 p.m. So let's look at this polling in a bit more detail and our attitudes to this all-important question about the death penalty, which is, should we bring it back? And for sure, when you think about it, it's I guess, an alarming, even frightening prospect. And we think of cases like Derek Bentley, Timothy Evans, Mahmoud Hussein Matan, Ruth Ellis, where history told us they either shouldn't have been hanged. The punishment for her was a crime of passion. She shot her cruel boyfriend. Matan was wrongly convicted. His family then saw justice. So there were miscarriages. And that's part of the reason the death penalty was cancelled in the 60s. But now let's see what this poll is telling us about our attitudes in 2025, because it's fascinating. So should the death penalty be brought back for certain crimes? Yes, 54%. And a much lower figure saying no, 34%, about 1 in 3. Next issue is how this breaks down by age group. And interestingly, you see older people less likely than younger people to want it back, 55 to 49. Young people are tougher on the death penalty. By party, these are the toughest party members. Reform, more of them want it than Conservative members, more of whom want it than Labour members. Then it's Lib Dems and Greens. And then finally, the majority think it should be used for murder of multiple people, murder of a child, murder of an emergency worker, rape of a child. Views are more mixed for the rape of an adult. A small minority want it for burglary. So I just, on the basis that everyone said we'll never leave the EU, and then we did. Everyone thinks we'll never have capital punishment back. And Nick, I'm starting to look at this thinking maybe we will.
Well, I hate the thought of it. I'm absolutely, totally opposed to it. My very spirit. Why are we executing people? Is it a sense of revenge? Is it some... Anne, you'll be against me, I know you will. And I think I'm in a minority. But let me finish.
Yeah, just answer.
Let me finish. And I think there's room for mercy in a civilised society and forgiveness. I know people are evil and dreadful, but to execute, to take a life for having taken a life, I don't think is a good thing. And spiritually, I hate it, and I hope we don't take that rather barbaric rule. Surely we're a more civilised society.
And you disagree?
I disagree very strongly, yes. I agree entirely when it comes to retribution. I'm not interested in retribution. And if that was the only argument for the death penalty, I'd be anti. But there is also the argument of deterrence. And so I ask myself this. First of all, is it a deterrent? Well, in the 5 years following the abolition of the death penalty, we continued to collect statistics based on capital and non-capital murder. And the capital murder rate went up 125%. Now, that's in Hansard. That is a solid fact. Therefore, I conclude it is a deterrent. And so if it is a deterrent, is there a moral argument for having it? And I say yes, because if it actually works as a deterrent, then you've got to balance the lives of the innocent who will be killed if the deterrent is removed against the lives of the guilty. And I'm afraid, therefore, that I come down very, very firmly in favour not of having it every 5 minutes, but of having it available to the courts.
I appreciate what you say about the 60s. I didn't know that we had a jump in capital crimes after we... Yeah, I'd like to see more of that. I mean, the figures are quite low. We have about 700 murders a year in this country. But look at the states, Anne. Isn't that the argument against it?
No.
They violently end the lives of criminals, and they've got violent crime coming out their ears.
And I think there's very good reason. And the reason for that is we heard that guy's been on death row for 26 years. So there is no connection in the public mind between the crime and the penalty.
Oh.
It's 26 years. Now, in this...
So execute them the day after they get convicted.
No, don't be silly, Jeremy. Let's treat this seriously. In this country, there was a very fast appeal, and then the execution used to be about a week later. It was a very quick process. And so you could have a direct link between the crime itself and the penalty. I mean, the states, for heaven's sake, 26 years.
Where are you on that?
I'm interested in that statistic. As you say, death row in America, the courts slow things down in 20 years and all the rest of it. But the point is, there's wholesale slaughter going on in America. People don't seem to be the slightest bit deterred. And in fact, in many, many cases, be they anger or jealousy or a mistake, an error, whatever it is, they're not thinking, well, I better not do this because I might get hanged. I don't think people are thinking about the consequences when they pull that trigger or stab some. 2 people killed in a stabbing in a Lloyd's bank. Do you think they're saying, I better not do this because I could get hanged?
Yeah,
the
background fear of knowing that the death penalty is there is actually very powerful. And I can remember at the time of the abolition, shortly after the abolition, a huge uproar because some criminal had actually said, well, I figured I wouldn't get any more for murder than attempted murder.
Yeah, I wonder why we didn't execute the Moors murders. Is that because the
death penalty had been abolished?
Really? Well, they would have been for the chop.
They just missed it, I think, by months. Yeah.
Well, that's an argument in your favour.
I'd have done it, yeah.
Gordon's in Lancashire. Gordon, would you bring it back?
Definitely would, Jeremy. Definitely.
With the idea that Anne says you don't have 20 years on death row, you get convicted, you have a quick appeal, and a week later, if you lose the appeal, you're gone.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can I just make one? I was just going to make one point. On that basis, Lucy Letby would be dead. And now we've got like 1,000 questions about her conviction.
I wouldn't like to comment on Lucy Letby, but the thing is, I was in the prison service for 10 years, and I've always said that anybody who murders, rapes, machetes or whatever, that murders them intentionally, murders a person, a child, an old person, intentionally, should forfeit their place on this earth. They should be either a needle, tablets, whatever, but they have forfeit their place on this earth.
OK, and Gordon. Stay there. Ian in Lancashire is listening. Ian, you disagree with Gordon?
Yes, I do. There's just been too many long prison sentences given out to people based on poor evidence. I mean, Andy Malkinson recently released after 20 years in prison for a rape conviction.
A rape conviction, yeah. Well, Birmingham 6, Guildford 4.
Yeah, Marvin Haynes freed after 20 years for a murder conviction. Stephen Amery. There's a long list of them.
But we know who did hang on. We've got no problem identifying people who are definitely guilty, Ian. I'll take an example. Ian Huntley for the Soham murders. Yes, yeah. Kyle Clifford for the Crossbow murders. Moore's murders. There's a category of criminal where there's no question. Yes,
exactly. But where do you draw that line? I mean, let's look back at Bentley. Bentley had the mental capacity of a 10-year-old. In that case, the jury recommended leniency. They recommended he was not given the death penalty. The judge overruled them and he was hung. Yeah. There's no bringing them back. And he was already in police custody.
And he's the one, it's the famous thing where he's doing it with an older person and...
No, a younger person.
I'm so sorry. And the policeman says, give me the gun to the other guy. And Bentley says, let him have it. And we've never known, does he mean hand the gun over or does he mean shoot him?
But-
We've never known the answer.
But he was convicted at the time under the law of joint enterprise.
Yes, he was.
It said that if you were on a crime and a murder was committed, you were jointly responsible.
I know, but you can see...
No, all I'm saying is, I'm not saying that was right or wrong. All I'm saying is he was convicted under a very clear law.
I understand. Yeah, I'm just kind of suggesting it was wrong. OK, thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Ian. After the break, more calls. Should Britain bring back the death penalty? We've got loads of people wanting to speak about this. Now, more of your calls on bringing back the death penalty. Is it a good idea? 0207 862 2222. Give us a call. Getting loads of calls. John in Bedfordshire, how do you feel about this, John? Hey, John.
Hello?
I'm nervous.
Oh, yeah, don't worry about being nervous. I understand.
Yeah, partly because there have been miscarriages of justice, and there was no guarantee that it would be foolproof, even now, if it was brought back. And also, I'm the younger brother of a murder victim. My brother was murdered in 2009, and I thought about it even more leading up to the trial of his two killers and that, and I just said it wouldn't bring him back, and there's no sense of justice. It'll satisfy sort of like some people be satisfied. I mean, my late father was a supporter of the death penalty, but I was on the opposite side of the fence. I opposed it from the age of 12.
So you did. So I suppose the key question here is: I'm very sorry to hear about your brother, John. Did your brother's killers get a good sentence? Did they get a decent spell behind bars?
Thank you for that question, Jeremy, because I can give you a very good answer to that question. They were sentenced to life imprisonment to serve a minimum of 14 years. In 2010, one of them used his right of appeal, and the Court of Appeal ruled that the minimum sentence they were given, that he was given along with his co-murderer, was reasonable, even though it should have been a bit higher. And last year, both men were given parole, had another parole hearing. Oh, well, we're going to have a second parole hearing because they had one in 2021. And the last government decided that they shouldn't have a parole hearing. Then they were both paroled and deported back to Poland.
Okay, so they were from Poland. All right. So
yeah.
That's it. They've gone and maybe they're in a Polish jail. John, thank you so much for talking about that. And it's complicated, isn't it? Because you've described the pain and agony of your brother's death, but you're not in favour of his killers being hanged. Julie in Somerset, would you want the death penalty?
Yes, please. I would like it brought back. I had to move down from London. I had to give up my career and a very good job to come back to Cheddar near Bristol, which is where I'm living now, because I was actually too frightened to go out because of knife crime. And I think Miss Widdecombe is absolutely right. Bring back the death penalty for criminal murder. I mean, like somebody that goes to the post office, to the bank with a knife. Knife crime in this country is getting really bad. Yeah, and I am sometimes frightened to go out even here on my own.
Were you a victim of knife crime yourself?
No, but I lived in a place called Notting Hill Gate in London, which is at the back of Paddington, and there was always somebody walking around with a knife, like the carnival and everything. I stopped going to carnival because of all the violence, and I was frightened.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Jill in Manchester, bring it back or not?
Oh God, no. I completely agree with everything Nick's had to say. I think it's abhorrent. I'm a member of Amnesty International, so I feel really strongly about this. I don't think it's a deterrent. We only need to look at Texas for that example. And I think it makes us as bad as the perpetrator. The other issue is it's incredibly expensive. If you look at America and you look at the cost of an individual on death row, it costs an average of $2.4 million to keep them there because they have to have so many appeals to make sure that they're actually... Well,
Anne sorted that out. She would truncate the appeals process.
I go back to how we used to do it.
Yeah,
which means we will potentially end up killing innocent people. We've got the Lucy Letby case. That's ongoing. It might turn out that girl's innocent. We just don't know. And, if we did what Anne Widdecombe suggested and just hang people next week. God help us, I wouldn't want to live in that kind of country.
Yeah, the Lucy Letby case is problematic because you would just go on the conviction there, so that's it.
Well, I think you can introduce certain safeguards. I've always said this. First of all, most of those cases you mentioned, some of them I don't think were miscarriages. They're just things we wouldn't do now. But first of all of the ones that you picked out came before DNA.
Yeah.
Before DNA. I think where you've got DNA evidence, where you've got somebody actually disturbed in the act, where you've got somebody who admits it, where you've got very clear and indisputable evidence. And I think you can put those sort of safeguards in. Then I think.
And how many people would you want to be executing per year?
Oh, for heaven's sake. I mean,
20?
I wouldn't even begin to think of it like that. Wouldn't even begin to think of it as a numbers. It's not a numbers game. It's a question of who was guilty and liable to the death penalty. It's certainly not a numbers game, for heaven's sake, Jeremy.
And what method would you use? Because these are serious matters.
Well, it would be a serious.
Hanging?
It would be a serious matter if it came back to sort out which method you would use. Yes.
Yeah. What would you use, Nick? You wouldn't use the method, would you?
Well, you wouldn't use the method.
I'd
Well,
oppose
in the
it.
States, they've allowed the firing squad. Okay.
Yeah, but knowing them, they won't even be able to do that properly. I mean, you've got a lethal injection that doesn't kill somebody. You've got the electric chair that takes very long, and it's all horrible.
All right.
And
Thank you for your calls. There's much more to say, and you can watch Dead Man Walking, Dan Walker on death row tonight on 5, 9 p.m.